used to happen was when there is a meeting that happens with my boss and with other peers, I would be quiet, I would be observing, I wouldn't talk too much. And then my boss started asking me, why are you not speaking up? The appraisal process, the performance review process happened, and first time in my career, I was rated an average. And I looked at, there was a book which I bought, Susan Cain's book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts. I realized that right around that stage itself, I realized there is this personality trait called introverts, and I started researching around it. And that's when I realized there were so many people like me, quiet in nature. Often, I myself saw them as somebody who may not have the potential. And when I started coaching them, I saw a massive difference in the way they are performing. Introverts are people, they're not shy. They are people who actually gain their energy in solitude. When they are quiet, they have a lot of energy. While extroverts are people, they gain their energy when they are in a social environment. So one of the questions that is always asked is, can introverts become extroverts? The answer is, if you're quiet in a corporate environment, if you're quiet in a business environment, the person who communicates will gain. You would have done 100 different things to make something successful. How will they know you have done 100 things unless you tell them? Somebody else already have made some statement, or they have made their comments, and the leadership team look at them and they move forward. By the time I am ready to respond as an introvert, the conversation has moved ahead. Can introverts be leaders? And my answer is yes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Business Giseness. After a small hiatus of about 3 months, happy to be hosting an English podcast again. It's my great honor and great pleasure to introduce Johncey George, today's guest, who has created a niche of making introverts the C-level executives. Johncey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting. It's an honor and pleasure to be here.
I've always marveled at the way you coach, right? And we are part of BNI. And most of the trainings that I have fortunately attended has been trained by you. You were a trainer. What has always stood out is the ease with which you have conveyed things in a language that they understand. So I want to know your journey. How did you start? Where did you start? Please walk us through your journey.
I was born and brought up in Kerala. I studied in a school. The name of the school is Mount Bethany. And later I did my pre-degree from SB College, Chennasheri, again in Kerala. And post that, I did my computer science engineering from Bangalore, Ambedkar College, Bangalore. And in 1996 is when I actually started working. And I started off as a trainee engineer, then got as a software engineer, and then moved into managerial role, senior development manager role. And then I got an opportunity to be part of this organization called Skelter. It was the same organization which I worked, but the company morphed in from a services organization into a software product organization called Skelter. And when that happened, one of my bosses, he promoted me to the chief operating officer role. His name is Sanjay Shah. And then in 2010, Skelter got acquired by Invensys PLC, a London-based organization. And at that point of time, I became the operations director. And also, I was made the head of software delivery center for Bangalore.
Yes.
And that was kind of how the journey started.
Amazing. Obviously, that did not stop there. Something in you triggered at some point in time where you said, I have seen some human behavior which needs intervention. And there is this huge population of people who are extremely talented, but for their own innate shortcomings, if I can call them that. They do not excel, or at least people perceive them not to be the right fit for managerial roles. You identified that the introverts were the underserved community and you wanted to do that. I want to know what triggered that coaching mindset.
When I look back at my career throughout my journey in the corporate world, I've realized that at some point of time I was always in a leadership role.
Right.
That is number one. And it was not ending there. At every point of time, when I look back and when I'm recollecting the memory, I've been training people. I've been training people in my team. I was training people in other teams in the organization. So somehow that nature of imparting knowledge to others to make others successful was something which was there in me. Now, I spoke about, I moved in, my company got acquired by Invensys, and then Invensys got acquired by Schneider. That was in around 2014, 2015. And in 2015 is when I moved into a new role. And that was a completely new environment. And it was a new boss at that point of time. And what happened was, when I started working over there, I was actually quiet in meetings. I was trying to understand what this organization is all about. I was also trying to understand the various processes in the organization. I was trying to understand the people. So, what used to happen was, when there is a meeting that happens with my boss and with other peers, I would be quiet, I would be observing, I wouldn't talk too much. And then my boss started asking me, "Why are you not speaking up? Why are you quiet in meetings? You don't sound confident. You don't appear confident in meetings." And that was something which was constantly happening at that stage. And it was a time when the first or second appraisal, I don't exactly remember where it was. The appraisal process, the performance review process happened. And the first time in my career, I was rated an average. And that was a shock of the life for me. And that was really the turning point where I realized, what is happening to me. And that was a time when I got coached myself. I was looking at outside help to see, who can help me in this particular situation. And then I got coached by a leadership coach. And then slowly I started realizing more about myself. And I was kind of researching, and in 2016, and I was looking at my Gmail, and I looked at, there was a book which I bought, Susan Cain's book, Quiet, and The Power of Introverts. So I realized that in right around that stage itself, I realized there is this personality trait called introverts, and I started researching around it. And somewhere in 2018, one of the vendors who was working with me, he realized that there's a lot of potential in me. They were doing a leadership program, and I was handling it on my side. And he said, "Johncey, you have a lot of potential. You should go through a coach training program." And I attended a coach training program. And that's when even a lot more self-realization started to come in. And then I started coaching people within the organization. And that's when I realized there were so many people like me who are quiet in nature. Often, I myself saw them as somebody who may not have the potential. And when I started coaching them, I saw a massive difference in the way they are performing, the way they are communicating, the way they are trying to move forward in their work. And that's when I realized it's not just me. There are many other people who are struggling like this, and who are struggling without getting promoted in organization. So that was a turning point, in fact. And that's when I realized that this is a career path I want to take up and touch a lot more people and help them.
If I can ask you, what is a typical character trait of a introvert? How does an introvert operate?
So there's a lot I've read over the last few years, starting 2016, I would say, on this topic. There are different definitions that come out that is out there, but the one which I love and which is also supported by many other books and leaders is what Susan Cain has written. It says introverts are people, they're not shy. They are people who actually gain their energy in solitude.
Mm.
When they are quiet, they have a lot of energy, you know. And while extroverts are people, they gain their energy when they are in a social environment.
Right.
Introverts gain the energy when they are in a quiet environment. Extroverts gain the energy when they are in a social environment. And we have the third trait, which is the ambiverts. They are right in the middle of introvert extrovert spectrum. Now, see, human nature is complex. It's not a one or a zero.
Right.
So ambiverts fall right in that in the middle of that spectrum. They have that traits of introverts, they have the traits of extroverts, and they behave differently in different situations.
Yeah.
People behave, ambiverts behave differently in different situations, and that's what I've understood. Now, when I relate myself to what was written over there, it was 100% truth over there. I am extremely comfortable in a quiet environment. If I can avoid people, I would love to avoid people. It's not that I hate them. It's not that I don't like to socialize and be with them. In fact, when I'm with friends, I love the energy. They will be talking, I'll be quiet. I'll be happy listening. So it is a trait. I mean, it is part of our DNA.
Mm.
We are born like that.
Right.
So one of the questions that is always asked is, can introverts become extroverts? The answer is no. Introverts will always remain introverts. Extroverts will always remain extroverts, and ambivert will always remain an ambivert.
And also, there is no real need for people to change, right? It's because there's no one right formula and say this is what will give you success in life, right? You can continue to be an introvert and yet do some exemplary work in life, and you can continue to be an extrovert and continue to do some extraordinary stuff in life, or ambivert for that matter, right? I just wanted to interject and say that there's no real need for people to change their trait. They are what they are, right?
They are what they are, and we cannot change it also.
Right.
The issue lies when you are in a business or a corporate environment.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
What happens is communication is extremely key.
Right.
And in every business conversation, in a corporate conversation, it's all about influencing the people on the other side.
Correct. Correct.
Positively influencing the people on the other side. So if you're quiet
Mm.
in a corporate environment, if you're quiet in a business environment, the person who communicates will gain.
Right.
And that's where the challenge actually comes.
Mm.
Most of the introverts, they don't realize this in the corporate world. What happens in the corporate world, especially, is in the early stages of the career, it's the technical skill, their functional skills that matters. And they get promoted.
Mm.
But when it comes to middle management and senior management, it's not the technical or functional skill that matters. It's actually the leadership skill and the influential communication skill that matters a lot.
Right.
And that's what introverts need to realize. They can be quiet, but in a corporate environment, if they are quiet, that's not going to help.
True. Very true.
And that is a realization which I got And that's a realization which I'm trying to impart to many thousands and millions of introverts out there.
Amazing. Um, we've touched upon the hidden cost of staying quiet. Right. When an introvert realizes that the management has now become a game of communication, I possess everything that a leader requires, but communication is a gap. Do introverts withdraw from the race? Is that something that you have seen? Do they say, okay, it's not my cup of tea. Why don't I just stay put, not get into the leadership at all? Is that a common sentiment that an introvert typically achieves?
I I've heard people stating that I don't want to get into politics. I don't want to get into leadership roles because I don't want to manage people. It is too much for me.
Right.
But the only thing which I tell them is this is a skill
Mm.
that can be learned.
Okay.
It's a skill that can be learned, and like how driving is a skill that can be learned. Once you start learning how to drive, then it becomes easier for you.
Sure.
Otherwise, it looks difficult.
Right.
So, similarly, communication and leadership, these are also skills that can be learned. Once you learn the skill, it becomes easier. So, that is an awareness that I'm trying to bring in to the whole world right now. That these are skills that you need to learn to succeed.
Mm.
It's not that extroverts are not upskilling themselves; they are also upskilling.
True.
And but introverts need to upskill in these areas for sure.
Right.
For the corporate environment. See, if they don't speak in their personal environment,
Mm.
they typically have limited number of friends, limited number of people they interact with,
Right.
and that's okay.
Right.
It doesn't matter, right? And typically in a in your friend circle, you are a quiet person, and they will take you along. It
Right.
doesn't matter. It doesn't happen in the corporate world,
Right.
and that's where the challenge comes. This is a realization they need to have, and that is the kind of message, and that's the kind of message I'm trying to give out to the introverts out there, that these are skills that we need to learn, and that is definitely required in the business environment.
Gone are the days where you can say, my work will speak for itself.
Absolutely.
Right. If you don't advertise yourself, if you don't put your work through a process of communication, uh, gone are the days where the corporate will identify that hidden talent and come and reward you for what you've done. Dude, is that's something that you have experienced too?
100%. 100%. You are quietly doing your work. Brilliant. But who knows about it? And a lot of people think that, hey, my manager should notice this,
Yeah.
my company should notice this and reward. But they have their own things to do. There is a time for them to notice what you have done. And you would have done 100 different things to make something successful. How will they know you have done 100 things unless you tell them? Very simple, right? If you look at it, if you don't tell them, how will they know?
Correct.
So, and that is a realization even introverts need to have. Yeah, so we need to talk about our work. And it's not boasting.
Correct.
Boasting is different.
Mm.
Boasting is, oh, me, I'm the only person kind of a feeling. That is boasting. But here we are talking about branding.
Mm.
How do you brand yourself better? How do you talk about your work in a manner that others know about it? And that is another art, another skill, I would say, that one needs to learn. Introverts are by default quiet in nature.
Mm.
Because they are quiet in nature, they take all their time to analyze the information, process that information, right? So they are actually deep thinkers,
Right.
not overthinkers, deep thinkers who analyze things. And they would communicate only when that information is processed and they feel that it is good enough to be communicated.
Mm.
Until such time, they don't really talk. And unfortunately, that may not work in the corporate world.
Right.
So, coming back to your question, they need to process, and that is the reality. What happens in the corporate world hence is, by the time they are processing, they are thinking and processing, somebody else already have made some statement, or they have made their comments, and the leadership team look at them and they move forward. And by the time I am ready to respond as an introvert, the conversation has moved ahead. And that is where, introverts typically lose out. And that's an awareness they need to have.
You've been coaching a lot of introverts. What is the framework that you put them through? You have your own trademarked framework. What is a start point for an introvert that you put them through to realize and act upon and achieve a favorable outcome? Because you're all about outcome. Yours is not a framework which is theoretical in nature. You have developed something extremely practical. So that means you are invested in the success of your trainee, your coachee, right? Can you walk us through this framework that you've built, and what is the start point and where do they end up with?
So I built this framework called voice. It's actually called the introvert voice. The V of voice, it stands for value. What does it mean is, when you want to communicate to someone, why should they actually listen to you? If they have to listen to you, you should be providing some value to them.
Correct.
So if an introvert can realize that their conversation can generate value for the other person, they will want to listen. So you don't need to talk a lot, but if you can create value for the other person, that creates magic. The O of voice, it stands for organizing thoughts. As an introvert, there's a lot that is going on in our minds. I'm trying to get that information from you, then I'm processing it, and then I'm trying to organize it, then I'm trying to make sense out of it, and then I'm gonna decide what should I tell. So if I can organize that thoughts in a structured manner, then it becomes easy for me to communicate. So I have some frameworks within that which will help you to organize thoughts.
Okay.
The I stands for influence. In communication, the words would contribute to only 7% of influential communication.
Interesting.
About 55% is body language, and 38% is actually the tone of voice.
Okay.
So when you want to communicate in an influential manner, you need to ensure that you need to incorporate body language, you need to incorporate tone of voice along with the choice of words that you use. So in I, it is all about how you can influentially communicate. The C of voice, it stands for credibility building. When you are a credible person, the other person wants to listen to you. So how do you build credibility? How do you ensure that others know about you? We spoke a little bit about personal branding earlier. So if you can build your credibility, other person would want to listen to you. Even in a business environment, in an organizational environment, if you can build credibility and others know about that, they would want to listen to you. And E stands for engagement. In any conversation which you have, you need to engage with the other person. Engage with questions, engage with some answers, they want to hear from you. You also want to engage them to take action at the end. So that is important. So how do you engage with the audience, engage with the person sitting on the other side, engage with the people sitting in a boardroom? All that is important. So voice, in essence, it stands for these 5 areas. And that is something as a foundation I coach people on. Then there are many other frameworks that I use called an exec framework on how do you communicate with executives. When you present to executives, what do you say? What would you not say? For example, in today's world, you don't have half an hour to impress the senior leadership of an organization.
True.
You may have to communicate your message in maybe a minute.
30 seconds.
And in the first 7 seconds itself, you will have to influence, right? So, how do you communicate with the senior management team in today's world? Often, people go for a long presentation, and like how a movie is, they would keep the climax to the end, and by that time, you would have lost the senior management. So, I always say, bring the climax in the beginning. Tell them what they want to hear. When you tell them what they want to hear, and they will be curious, how did you make that happen?
Right.
So that's how, in exec framework, I coach people on that. And there are many other frameworks which I coach people on for impromptu conversation, for example. Introverts will have a big challenge in impromptu conversation. And I have frameworks around that. And when they are coached on that framework, impromptu conversation becomes easier for them.
Amazing. Johncey, the mega question, elephant in the room. Can introverts be great leaders?
Yes.
Wow, I like it.
Absolutely. And there are numerous examples out there. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg, Marissa Mayer of Yahoo, Bill Gates. Then we have Warren Buffett, Steven Spielberg. You can see there are leaders from various spheres of life who are there.
Right.
Introverts can become amazingly great leaders for sure. But as we discussed earlier, obviously, in the corporate world, they definitely need to develop these additional skills.
Right.
And as I said, the leadership skills, the influential communication skills, that's something they need to develop. It may not be very natural to them.
Right.
And that is something they need to be aware of. So I would highly encourage the introverts out there to develop these skills so that they can put their work out there and make sure that it is visible and others recognize. And that's important for you to get into leadership roles for sure.
Amazing. Introverts by default are deep thinkers. So obviously they have performed better at whatever role they have taken up, especially people in science, people in sports, people in investment. They've done extremely well because that requires a certain level of, penance, if I can call it. There's a meditative state that you get into, you think and you perform. But when they become leaders, and if they're not self aware of their own shortcomings, there are numerous examples where the transition is not smooth. So, not always a top performer is actually a leader, right? What are your thoughts on this?
Self-awareness is an extremely critical component of our success. And this is something which I realized a lot more once I went through a coaching program myself and when I was trained to become a coach. The key exercises which we started off with are self-awareness exercises.
Right.
And today, even in my coaching program, when I start the coaching program, there's always a self-awareness exercise, a 2-hour exercise they go through so that they are aware of who they are as a person. Why do they behave the way they behave? Why do others behave the way they behave? So that self-awareness about themselves is absolutely important. So any coaching program of mine starts with that. The leaders who I have coached, they come to me with different challenges. When they come to me, it might appear as it is just a promotion challenge.
Okay.
Now, I'm not getting promoted to the next level. The underlying issues could be different. And that is where a lot of conversation happens between those people. And I help them understand the reasons why they are not getting promoted. And when they go through the self-discovery exercise, the self-awareness level further goes up. And in any context they are in a leadership context they are in, that self-awareness level is absolutely important. And hence, developing that self-awareness is something they need to work on continuously. It's not a one-time exercise. Every single time they are in a leadership context, they need to always think about themselves a little bit. What is the emotional state they are in? What could be the emotional state the other person in? And that is very important. And one thing I always say is that when we are leading people, we are leading with the emotions of people.
True.
Okay. So understanding our own emotions, understanding others' emotions are very important. There are numerous examples of leaders who have worked with me and moved into senior leadership roles faster. See, one of the things in the corporate world is, because of the technical and functional nature of the work, in the early stages of the career, they get promoted faster.
Right.
But when it comes to middle management and senior management, unless they demonstrate that they are capable of leading at the next level, they won't be promoted.
Correct.
And that demonstration comes only if you speak, if you communicate.
Okay.
Right? And for that, personal branding is important. Networking is important. Developing that executive presence is important. Sponsorship of people is very important. What is sponsorship? In the organization, you cannot get promoted to other roles in, let me say, in a larger organization, mid and larger organization. You cannot get promoted to a senior role unless a few others recommend you. And these people are called the sponsors.
Correct.
So you need to have the sponsors in the organization who will support you, who vouch for you and say that, hey, this person is good to be promoted to the next level. And how do you create sponsors? If you have to create sponsors, you need to network. And networking is not something which introverts are very comfortable with. Ideally, they want to be in a quiet environment. So there are various different elements which is involved in this. So one of the leaders who came to me for coaching, she was a lot more self-aware as a leader. And she came to me, said, I'm doing amazingly well and I want to develop my networking skills. And I want to develop my personal branding. And these are two areas which we worked on. And let me tell you, in 2 years' time, that person has become the CFO of a multinational company. From a senior director to a CFO in just 2 years' time. There was one more example like that. A general manager, and this person is working in the banking industry, and he got promoted to the role of a chief technology officer in about 1.5 years' time. And in about 2.5 years' time, that person got promoted to the CIO of that organization.
Amazing.
And these are true success stories which are there, and it is there in my website also. And there are many other stories like that.
Right.
HR heads of companies, CTOs of companies, supply chain leaders of companies. And they are all people who were in the middle management role. Because of the coaching they received, they moved into senior leadership roles faster. In today's world, moving to that faster is important. Otherwise, somebody else is going to take that role. Because when we go into an organizational hierarchy, there are limited number of roles at the top.
Okay.
So there will be 10 people looking at one role. So how do you make sure that you are that one person? Okay. And that is where all these elements which we discuss are very important.
Amazing. You're talking about the self-awareness. There's one passage in Sachin Tendulkar's autobiography where he talks about when he took up the leadership of the team and why he couldn't translate his performance into team success. He talks about how he was acutely unaware of his innate inability to communicate with people. He naturally assumed that would people would be as hungry as he was, as passionate about the game as he was, and would perform at that level that he would perform. A natural miscommunication that happened between him and the team, and how he was acutely unaware of his own shortcomings, and how he was a, a, a born introvert, and he couldn't communicate what would make an ideal team composition. He could not tell people that, look, this is your role, this is what you're supposed to do. An effective leader invariably does this. And you're so right that the journey of transformation starts with self awareness, right? So, for people, let's say there's an introvert sitting in a cubicle watching this podcast, and they need to do, they need to start on a transformational journey. If I have to put you on the spot and ask, what are the three things you want them to do today?
The first thing they need to do is look at their own career and analyze where they are as of now. And more often than not, they would realize they are communicating well. A lot of people come to me and say, my language skills are great. I communicate well. But communication is not about just exchange of words. It's not just the language. It is about how you can positively influence your senior leaders, how you can positively influence your stakeholders. So one of the things I would ask them to evaluate is, are you able to positively influence your stakeholders, your peers, your leaders, your customers on a regular basis? And that is something they absolutely need to develop. Second, as an introvert, without networking, it is almost impossible to grow into senior leadership roles. For you to get a sponsor for yourself, for you to get approvals from your CEO for certain projects, you need to influence people.
Right.
And that influence will come only when you network with people. So if you are an introvert, and I know as an introvert, I ideally don't want to network. If I sit with that mindset, I'm not going to succeed. So I have to make sure that, I go out and network. And one of the coaching programs which I conduct is around networking, how introverts can network with ease. And this is actually something which I learned from BNI.
Amazing.
Right? So we'll talk about that a little later. So networking is very important. And the third thing I would say is personal brand. Building a personal brand is important. When we spoke about the voice framework, I also said credibility building is important.
Right.
And building that credibility through personal branding is a must.
Right.
And that is something they absolutely need to work on.
Absolutely. You briefly spoke about the necessity for networking, and the golden adage is your network is your net worth. And we both are part of this fantastic organization by name BNI. I want to ask you about your experience with BNI. Now you're a senior director consultant and training director. Talk to us about BNI as an organization and your experience with it.
I'm extremely fortunate to be part of BNI. I got introduced to BNI when one of my neighbors heard about me quitting and starting my own company. And she said, you should join this organization. And it has been a turning point in my career. So when I quit the corporate world, I would say my network was zero. As an introvert, I hardly network with people outside. And BNI gives such an amazing platform to network. And very easily, how you can network is something I learned from BNI. Dr. Ivan Meissner, being an introvert himself, he has said that in his podcast, has also said that, it's an amazing place for introverts to grow their skills. And I've heard so many business owners also telling the same thing, that after coming to BNI, I started to communicate much better. And that's the truth, because there are structured programs available in BNI to hone their skills,
Sure.
to how to pitch in 30 seconds, to how to pitch in 8 minutes. These are all things that you learn. And when you are meeting with people, how do you network?
Right.
Where do you stand? Where you should not stand while networking? All that is something which we have learned from BNI. BNI has definitely helped me to grow as a person. It is also giving me today a platform to test my leadership skills also.
Right.
We are working with business owners, and as a senior director consultant, when I'm working with business owners,
Right.
how can I influence them is, and I have to influence the equal over there.
Correct.
They are also business owners like me, but I have to influence them. How do I do that? And
Right.
that is something which I have learned from BNI. And BNI is also a platform where my own coaches, I invite them to witness a BNI networking meeting, and they have also learned a lot from there. So directly, indirectly, when I say directly, through the referrals and business I'm getting through those referrals, and indirectly many of these other things which I just said, definitely help BNI a worthwhile place to be.
Absolutely.
I thoroughly enjoy it.
Absolutely. Um, Johncey, I'm going to be asking you a very hard question. We all want to be remembered in a certain way. What do you want to be remembered for? 20 years down the line, and people see your journey, your contribution back to the society and to the leadership ecosystem of the country. How do you want to be remembered?
So I would like to be remembered as a leader who has created a community of quiet leaders who inspire future leaders and inspire a generation to come with their skills as quiet leaders. That is something which I am looking at.
Absolutely amazing. Johncey, it was such a delight to have you. I personally believe I'm an ambivert, right? I have in me a quiet introvert sitting. He was delighted to meet you. And I think this is going to be such a material for people who are struggling with their corporate life, because one, the self discovery is still a question mark, and they are thinking why they are not making the progress in in their career. I think this is going to be a great help for them. Thank you for making this podcast happen. And you traveled a long way to come here. So it was fantastic having you here.
Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure having you as the host and driving through these questions and navigating those questions. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to working together in the future.
Probably we can do one podcast on the extroverts, because that's also a program that you do. It's not just the introverts that you take care of, it's also the extroverts. Amazing. So, with that note, we end this episode. I'm going to leave the contact details of Johncey George, his website, his Instagram, his LinkedIn, and his contact number in the description. If you're an introvert or if you're an extrovert and struggling in your career, and if you want to build a solid career ahead, you know whom to contact. Johncey George. With that note, we end this episode. Thank you. Take care.